All right. So in this chapter, we're going to go through a little bit more detail beyond the simplistic, what is revenue management, selling the right room to the right guest, the right day, for the right price. So a little bit more components that go into revenue management. But what are some industries that you think might potentially use the concept of revenue management? So think about hotels is one, right? Yes. Um, possibly not quite retail. I mean, I guess retail in a way it could. What are some other services that are similar to hotels? What's that?
Airbnb,
Well, yeah, so Airbnb falls under hotels.
airlines.
Airlines, good. So retail, airlines. What's that? Cruise lines, absolutely. Yep.
Theme parks.
Um, yes, theme parks, they are going to be looking at basically the cost per guest or the what they call spend per guest. So how many guests do they have and how much money do they raise so or earn that day? So spend per guest. Yep. Anything else? Rental cars. Resorts. Yep, that's under hotels. Yep. Okay. So essentially, what all these different industries have in common is the perishability of their product. Once that cruise line sets sail, can I just drop somebody in that room?
No.
No. Okay. Once tomorrow, can I sell today's car to somebody tomorrow? No, right? So once midnight happens, any cars that are sitting in my rental car lot that didn't get rented, I can't sell that car tomorrow. I can sell it tomorrow, but then that goes on tomorrow's revenue. So once midnight happens, then that perishable product goes away. Can I sell tonight's room tomorrow to somebody? No, I can't sell yesterday's room either. Once yesterday happens, it happens. I can't put somebody in that room. Okay. And so the perishability is one of the major components of whether or not you can utilize revenue management techniques, tactics, and whatnot. Okay. So we already know what revenue management is. Selling the
Right room.
Right room.
Right guest.
the right guest on the right day for the right price. Okay? Those prices are going to fluctuate. The different types of groups we're going to have are going to fluctuate. Okay? So when we're thinking about revenue management, we want to define what our product is. Okay? Hotel rooms. But we can even go further. Is it a suite? Is it a presidential suite? Is it a standard room? Is it a standard room with two queen beds, or a standard room with one king bed? Okay, so all we have to define that product in order to be able to sell that room for the right price. Okay? What does the word benchmark mean? What is benchmarking? Yes.
Benchmarking is basically picking a point in time to measure how you and your competitors are doing.
Absolutely. So picking that point in time to determine how we are doing compared to our competitors. Okay? So competitive benchmarking, we want to know, do I have a better ADR, RevPAR, and occupancy than my competitors? Okay? Strategic pricing. Strategic makes you think of what? Long term or short term?
Long-term.
Long-term, right? Strategy. Thinking about strategy is long-term. And we'll talk about it in class. We also have tactical in a later chapter, and that is the short term. So we have strategies of what we have for maybe for the whole year. This is our goal, what we want to do for the whole year. This is how we're going to get that accomplished. In the short term, tactical, we're responding to what's happening right now to be able to hopefully reach our strategy, to reach our goals from our strategy. Okay. So strategic is long term, tactical is short term. And there's different ways that we react between the two. Okay. One of them is looking at forecasting and the demand. Demand and forecasting is not just, well, first of all, what does it mean when we talk about forecasting?
Look back.
Okay, so looking back, we're using our historical data, our historical information in order to predict the future or predict what's going to happen. Okay, are we always right? No. Just like the weather people, right? The last time these conditions were in the atmosphere, this is what happened. So if this is the conditions, I can make a logical guess that this is going to happen. Doesn't always happen, right? But so the same thing with us. What we think is going to happen based on forecasting may or may not, right? And so when we're looking at forecasting, what are some different things that we can look at when we're thinking about forecasting?
There's events coming in,
What's that?
events that are coming.
Yeah, if we have events that are coming up. So in 2025, we have the men's Final Four coming up in, what is it, April? Okay. Because she's the point of expertise for the Final Four. But I just know I volunteered for the music festival, so I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, any major events that are coming up. So the last time we had the men's Final Four was in 2018, right? So can I compare 2019? If I'm looking to forecast for 2019, can I compare that to 2018? Why?
There's no final four.
There's no Final Four in 2019, right? If I were to do that, I would come severely under budget because I would think I'm going to get the same amount of revenue that happened in that one weekend in 2018, and that would not be very good, right? So I might go back and look at 2017 and add a little bit because we're supposed to grow every single year, right? But maybe not grow as much as those odd years when we have major events. 2021. Anybody know what happened in 2021? NCAA, well, yes, COVID was happening. Yes. Yes, it absolutely was. The NCAA women's Final Four was supposed to be in San Antonio, right? And so the San Antonio, we were getting ready to host the women's Final Four. And then because of COVID, what happened? We hosted the entire tournament. Not just the last two games or last three games of the tournament to get the Final Four, right? The semifinals and the final game. We hosted the entire tournament. And so that means we had a lot of revenue that came in that we weren't expecting. So if we get a women's Final Four again, can we look back at 2021 and be like, yeah, we're going to do the same thing? No, right? And so it's really important to understand when you're thinking about the events that are happening and you're comparing it to the last time it happened, you also want to make sure that you're taking that into consideration. Okay. What else besides events? What else can we look at when we're thinking about forecasting?
Any new modifications we made to the hotel?
We might, yeah. So maybe if we made modifications to the hotel, like maybe we added or we expanded our ballroom space for whatever reason. Maybe we're going after new people. That could potentially be something that as we're forecasting, maybe we can go after larger groups. Okay. Or maybe a convention center opened up nearby that we can now host those larger groups. Good. What else? We've got events.
Holidays.
Holidays, yeah. And not only holidays, but when those holidays happen. So this year, 2025, when is Valentine's Day?
Friday.
It's on a Friday. For those of you who don't know, sorry. I only know because I look at it and if Valentine's Day is on a Friday versus Valentine's Day being on a Wednesday, what does that do to your reservations at the hotel? Right? Or your reservations at the restaurants. So knowing that that is going to happen on a specific day helps you to be better prepared for it. Okay, so not only just the holiday itself, but the day of the week. Okay, Fiesta, we also know happens in April. This year it's really late in April, and it actually spills over into May, which is kind of odd for Fiesta. So it's weird. If I looked at Fiesta 2024, it was all in April. So all that revenue comes in April. But in 2025, that revenue is going to be split a little bit between April and May. So as a revenue manager, you have to be able to forecast what that demand is going to be. Right? Yes.
I was also gonna ask, so like for, hotels, and Valentine's Day, on the weekend, it typically goes up, the price goes up on the weekend. So then that would be a good way then for them to even kind of double the rate from that, right? Because it's,
I wouldn't necessarily maybe say double the rate, but you could definitely ask probably a higher rate because on the weekend, if it happens during that time, because revenue management deals with the idea of supply and demand. Okay, so as our supply is really high, which means we have a lot of empty hotel rooms. If there's not a lot of demand, I want people in my hotel room, so I'm going to lower my rate so that I'm going to attract people to come and stay in the hotel, right? But if my my supply is really low because for whatever reason, like let's say, I'll give you an example. My friend graduated from Harvard back in 2015 or 16. And when I went to go visit her, I stayed with her mom in the hotel room because the Holiday Inn was $750 a night. They had one last room, one more room, and they were going to sell it for $750 a night. Okay. The demand was super high because there's 16,000 people graduating. So the demand is super high. Supply is really low. They can charge whatever they want. Okay. Well, within reason. They can't just say, I'm going to sell it for $1 million. That would be ridiculous, right? But the Holiday Inn, I mean, would you imagine paying $500 or $700 for a Holiday Inn? No, but if it's the last night and you need that night, maybe that's what you got to pay because supply is really low and demand is really high. I had a friend who used to own the Comfort Suites close to downtown. And when Final Four was here in 2018, she put, I think she said she put 20 rooms in a room block. So by doing that, it took them out of her inventory. So that way people that were booking through like OTAs or when people were making phone call reservations or online to the website, that they wouldn't see those 20 rooms. It would look like those 20 rooms were taken up, right? A week before the Final Four, she released those 20 rooms. She put a 4-night minimum, which is that's that tactical short-term strategy, meaning you've got to say all 4 nights. You can't just come in for 2 nights because I want to sell that room for all 4 nights. So you got to say all 4 nights at $500 a night. And she sold those 20 rooms out in about an hour and a half at $2,000 a reservation for a Comfort Suites. Right? So her strategy worked out really great. And so that is how revenue management works. We want to sell the right room to the right guest on the right day for the right price. Okay. And understanding what our demand is going to be is really important. Okay. Our business mix. Okay. Business mix. What do you think of when you hear business mix? Yeah, so we have leisure travelers, we have business travelers, and we have group travelers. Those are our major 3. Okay. Leisure, which is basically people visiting for fun, for vacation. Business is people who are traveling for business purposes. And group are people who are maybe coming in for a conference or a convention, right? So those are three major different business mix. If I have 500 rooms in my hotel, how many rooms do I get to decide goes to leisure, goes to business, and goes to group? That's what that business mix is. And it's not the same thing every day. On the weekends, I might be more leisure focused. On the weekdays, I might be more business focused, right? And so that is something that we'll talk about in a later chapter. And then distribution channels. What is the root word of distribution? Distribute. So how do we distribute? How do we get our product? How do we get our hotel rooms out to our potential customers and our guests, right? That can be direct through our website. It can be direct through an app. We also use OTAs. This is something I'll say quite frequently and you'll hear quite frequently. OTA is an online travel agent. So that's Expedia, Orbitz, Kayak. Those are the OTAs, the online travel agents. They are a necessary evil in our industry, right? Because it brings a lot of people to us. There's people that only use Orbitz and Expedia to book their hotel rooms, hotels.com, whatever, okay? I thought it was really interesting how restaurants during the pandemic, they all started using, what is it, like Grubhub, Uber Eats, all those apps, right? And then all of a sudden, about a year into it, there was this big article in the Senate or MySA, or maybe it was, what's the other one? The Rivard Report, I think. What's it called now? It's not the Rivard Report, San Antonio Report, something, whatever. This big article about like how horrible these apps are for the restaurants because they take such a large percentage. And I'm like, hello, hotels. We've been dealing with that for how long? Right? That's why you see those commercials say, hey, book directly with us. Because if they book directly with us, I don't have to pay any money to an OTA. So how do we distribute? How do we decide? And we can, as a revenue manager, we could say, you know what? I'm going to turn off Expedia. And Expedia is not going to, I'm not going to take any reservations from Expedia. Okay. Maybe my supply is getting so low and I want to sell it directly so I can, and the demand is high enough that I can just book it directly and get that. Okay. So we have some major areas of focus and we have some definitions on the bottom. Who wants to come up and take a guess at connecting? You'll basically just draw your finger from one top row to the bottom row. Anybody? Go ahead, Madison. Come on up. Which one are you gonna pick?
I'll do occupancy.
Occupancy, and that is good. How many rooms are sold? Excellent. Who's next? Who would like to go next? Okay, Oscar, go ahead.
Distribution channels,
Okay. That is,
where the soul is coming from.
yes. All right. Anybody else? Who's waiting for the last two so you can get a 50-50 shot? Right, Alyssa?
Rates with, when is discounting appropriate?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely. Yep. All right. Sarah, come on up. Fifty-50 shot.
All confidence.
We can do. There you go.
So limits who's buying.
Yep, absolutely. So segmentation, what's the root word of segmentation? Segment, right? The market segment is who is buying, okay? The sales mix is what else is sold. Okay, so the mix of what else is sold with it. So is it a spa package? Is it a golf package? Is it the rooms and the rental cars coming in with it? Do you get the airline ticket with also the hotel and the rental car, right? So that sales mix, what else is all coming in with that? Because we'll talk about, I can't remember the chapter number, but we'll talk about packaging. And how if we put things as a package, sometimes we're not gonna sell it as if it was the full price, but we might discount some areas because of the sales mix, okay? Questions about these areas of focus?
The sales package, they come in with like, example, like amenities too, no?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, the sales packages, the packages would definitely come with some types of amenities or other kind of features of that, okay? Rates. We'll talk about the different types of rates, but rack rate, R-A-C-K, the rack rate is what we obviously we try to get. That rack rate is the highest rate that you can charge for a hotel room. Now, in the state of Texas, it's required that that rack rate be posted on the back of the door in a conspicuous place. And usually that means on the back of the door. So if you ever go into a hotel room in Texas, you close the door, there should be what the maximum rate that that room can be sold for, okay? You should not be paying higher than that rack rate, okay? Because even in that situation where my friend who owned the Comfort Suites, her rack rate, now oftentimes our rack rates are really not really exorbitant, but pretty exorbitant, right? There's a hotel that I stay at downtown. It's one of my favorite hotels, the Emily Morgan. And one time, the general manager upgraded me to one of the suites. I think I was paying $185 for the night. The back of the door said it was going for $1,250 is the maximum, right? So only on those rare occasions, Final Four, big events that are happening, is when that rack rate is going to be asked for, okay? So, but when are we going to discount off of that rack rate? Okay, we'll talk about different types of discounts in another chapter. Excellent. So things we have to think about when it comes to revenue management, it has to be a fixed capacity. I can't just go out and build new hotel rooms because I have a few extra reservations for tomorrow, okay? I can't just easily put an extra row of seats on an airplane right before it takes off just because I want to sell a few more tickets. Okay, so a very fixed capacity. That has to be perishable. The demand is pretty varied, but we can also somewhat predict it. We know when there's going to be events coming up. In San Antonio, we know February is rodeo month. We know March is spring break. We know April is fiesta. We know that summer months happen, right? So it's pretty predictable. It does change and fluctuate, but it is pretty predictable. The other thing is that we have high fixed costs and we have low variable costs, right? Fixed costs. What is a fixed cost? What do we mean by when we say fixed costs? Yes, Madison.
Cost that stays the same, no matter the other variable behind it.
Absolutely. The cost stays the same. So like our rent, okay, our salaries, those are all fixed costs. And in hotels, that's usually pretty high. Variable costs change. So variable costs in our example of a hotel is if I don't sell that hotel room, do I have to wash those sheets?
No.
Do I have to replace the amenities in there?
No.
Do I have to pay someone to clean my room? No, those are variable costs. So if I don't sell that room, I do not incur those variable costs. Okay. And so with that, those are relatively low compared to the fixed costs being relatively high. Okay. So we talked about fixed capacity, perishable products, varied. Okay. So typically when we are looking at this, when we're looking at figuring out, when we're looking at figuring out the cost structure of our hotel room, we look at a couple of different things, okay? We'll get into it in a later chapter about the different cost structures that we use to actually determine the dollar amount. There's different ways that we do that. But a lot of things that we're looking at is those variable costs. We're also looking at the overall cost of the furnishings of the hotel, okay? When somebody is looking at buying a hotel and or building a hotel, one of the things that they look at is they often will evaluate that hotel at the cost per key. So let's say we have 200 rooms, okay? And we take $48 million to build this hotel, divide by 200 keys, that's 200 rooms. That's the cost per key. That allows us to give us a good idea of where we're gonna start with our pricing, okay? To be able to recoup those costs over time. Okay, so the furnishings, that's why when you think about a luxury hotel, when you walk into a hotel room, like we went to, where did we go? What luxury hotels we do last semester? Thompson and JW. Okay, when you walk into those hotel rooms versus a Hampton Inn, okay, or a Hilton Garden Inn, right? The amenities are a little bit different. The furnishings are different. And so that's why you have that differentiation in the level of the price of the room. Okay. So that's kind of how our cost structure works. Questions, comments, concerns about revenue management and what revenue management is or is not. Revenue managers are on the executive team of the hotel. They should be. Sometimes if you are, let's say you're working for a select service property, you may not have a revenue manager. The GM or the sales manager might be playing that role of revenue manager. Another thing that's really popular lately is people that are doing revenue management for multiple properties. And they work remotely. It's called a regional revenue management. So that regional revenue manager is responsible for managing and keeping track of the rates for multiple properties within a region. I think that if I were to go back to the industry after teaching, I feel like revenue management is where I would like to go because it's very, you have to be able to like see patterns. You have to be able, I like puzzles. I like putting things in different orders and kind of solving puzzles. I like math and numbers. But a lot of it is data analysis and they analyzing previous data to make future decisions. One of the revenue managers we talked to just before the pandemic, because pandemic happened in the middle of spring 2020. All right, so right before spring break, I actually took a group to the Westin for a field trip. And the revenue manager was talking about how this is right before spring break. People were starting to cancel reservations and things like that. And then when they reopened in the middle of the pandemic, he zoomed into my class and was talking about how they would love to open up 100%. They just don't have the staff to be able to clean all 100 rooms if they were sold out. So a decision that they made was to just operate at 60% occupancy. Even though they had empty rooms to sell, if people called and they said, we want a room, they would say they were sold out at 60% because they didn't want to overwork their staff. So that was really awesome, right? It's like you could say, yeah, let's take as many rooms as we want. And then our staff's going to be way overworked. We're going to be stressing to get those rooms done. Versus let's just take 60%, and then our staff can do a good job. We know we're gonna have some good quality work because especially during that time, the labor was increased on the number of how many minutes you had to clean your room because there was so many more extra steps that had to be done during that time. So that was one of their strategies to keep their staff from quitting, was to not overwork their staff. So I thought it was pretty awesome. Any other questions about revenue management? What we're gonna learn about in this class? All right, so I will post an announcement about AHLEI for those of you who have not done that before. And then I will also post an announcement about how to redeem your code on AHLEI. I'll put that all in one announcement. And then I will create the test exam in the AHLEI exam area. And then I will get your calendar posted in Canvas before next week on Tuesday. Okay, so next week on Tuesday, we're gonna go over chapters 2 and 3. I think. Let me double check. Hold on. Since we did, this is week 2. Yeah, we'll do chapter 2 and 3 next week. Okay. And so please watch the videos for chapter 2, the 3 videos for chapter 2, and then the 2 videos for chapter 3. Okay. We are going to do an in-class activity for chapter 3. It's going to deal a lot with ADR, RevPAR, and occupancy percentage. So please watch those videos and get a little bit more comfortable with that. So that way we can jump right into the activity for chapter 3. All right.
That quiz.
I'm gonna unpublish the quizzes for right now. Only because I want to make sure we don't happen what happened last semester, where you had different questions from the final exam, and the quizzes. I want to make sure so. Who has the voucher? Tania, can you do me a favor? Can you today go ahead and redeem your voucher, and then I can print out the test and make sure that the quizzes match the final exam questions. Okay. This one I think is only 50 questions. It's a shorter final exam. So thank you all so much.